One. What's going on, everybody? Thank you for tapping into another episode of the Mindful Moneymakers podcast, where we talk about all the tips, tricks, and strategies and the mindset shifts you need to know to live a life by design instead of by default. Today, I'm super excited to be introducing you to a powerhouse in the entrepreneurial space and a tremendous leader. I met her a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, and she's blown me away. So I'm super excited to introduce you to Dr. Wendy Labat, right?
Hi.
We call her the financial healer, and she's an award-winning entrepreneur, a four-time best-selling author, a business strategist, and an international speaker. Dr. Labat is also the producer and host of the global streaming production of Financial Cures with Dr. Wendy Labat. She's the CEO of Financial Cures LLC and the creator of Financial Cures, the Financial Cures System, which is a results-based program for financial mastery. She has her Doctor of Business Administration degree in entrepreneurship and almost 4 decades of entrepreneurial experience. Thank you for talking with us today. How are you feeling?
I'm good. Thank you. Happy New Year. Thank you for having me.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year indeed. So I was able to kind of give a little brief introduction to who you are and what you've been into. But I want to give you an opportunity to kind of dive in a little bit deeper. Tell us about your start, where you started, where you are now, and where are we headed?
Well, as you said, I started my entrepreneur journey almost 4 decades ago. I was just 2 years old back then. And it was a time there was no internet or social media. And back then, the only thing you could do with a cell phone was make an expensive phone call. So I opened an office equipment company, and my clients were major corporations and government agencies. And in order to be considered for the big contracts, you had to project a certain image. And that meant, having a brick and mortar office, employees, carry inventory, and all the overhead that goes with it. If you projected anything less, they perceived you as a mom and pop operation, not capable of handling the big business. So, of course, I wanted the big business. But eventually, that image was expensive and stressful because I wasn't getting the contracts at first. But right when I thought everything was about to, implode, I got my first big contract. And I'm like, thank you, Jesus. But, after that, I had the business was coming in. I was delivering the products, but the clients weren't paying as the terms of the contract. So I kind of suffered from what I call anorexic cash flow. You had money, business on the books, but not the money in the bank. So I ended up having to, at first I was afraid to say something because I'm a rookie entrepreneur. I didn't have any business experience, and I'm scared that now, they're going to try to take this contract away from me. But I talked to my mentor, and he said, look, what are the terms of the contract? I said, well, they're supposed to pay me in like net 10 days. He said, well, that's what you need to talk to them about. So sure enough, I did. And I was surprised because they didn't even know they weren't paying on time. The purchasing department is one thing, and, accounts payable is another, and they weren't really communicating. And then, with big corporations and government agencies, they put you in and then you get whatever they come, whatever they say you're going to get it, whenever they say you're going to get it. But once I brought it to their attention, they ended up working it out because I was, small minority female-owned business, and it was to their advantage as well to help my business succeed and to do business with me. So they realized that it was mutually beneficial for everybody. So, it ended up coming around like it's supposed to. But, eventually I kind of got tired of that, stressful corporate, government agency business. And I started a tax preparation business. And, it was a consumer based, I did some small business and nonprofit returns, but it was mostly consumers. And it turned out, it was lucrative. But in 2014, when the Affordable Care Act mandated that everyone have health insurance, I expanded that business to include insurance and financial services. So I didn't want to be a hypocrite. So I was buying all these products and using all these services I was selling to my clients, because I did have clients say, well, what are you using and where's your money? And I can honestly say, what I was using and where my money was. But after a meeting about a year later, a colleague of mine came up to me and we were just talking. He said, Wendy, I just had a physical and I found out I got kidney cancer. And I'm like, wow, kidney cancer. I never really heard of anybody, having kidney cancer. That was one, cancer that I had never really heard about. So I told him I was sorry to hear that. I would keep him in prayer, but I kind of jokingly said, I know you're going to clock some dollars, because I knew what products and services we were selling. And he said, Wendy, I don't have any of that. He said, I just barely got the minimum to meet the mandate as far as healthcare. I don't have any of the other supplemental products. And, I thought to myself, how are you going to be in this business and you don't have what you're selling to other people? But it just confirmed that, me not wanting to be a hypocrite buying all this stuff. I didn't buy it from a personal financial planning perspective. I bought it from a business and marketing strategy, perspective. And I'm glad I did, regardless of how I bought it, I had it. Because in 2017, I was diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer. And that meant, I wanted the aggressive form of treatment because I was conquering breast cancer. It wasn't going to conquer me. And I had chemotherapy every 3 weeks for a year at a price tag of $67,000 every 3 weeks for a year. I had 5 surgeries. I had all the CAT scans, PET scans, ultrasound, lab, everything that goes with that. And my medical bills ended up totaling almost $1.5 million. But because I practiced what I preached, my health insurance paid all of those medical expenses. And then because I had those other supplemental coverages, I ended up getting multiple 6-figure tax-free shots in the arm, financial shots in the arm. And, I didn't have to worry about money. I ended up, considering that the financial cure. I said, Lord, I'm healthy, I'm happy, I'm wealthy, I'm in my comfort zone, I'm good. And he said, no, you're going to go out on a crusade because I brought you out better on this side of the journey than when you went in, and you're going to empower other people to help them, or prevent them from letting a illness or injury ruin them financially, and to help them get their money in order to enjoy financial freedom and live the life they desire. So that's where I am now. I'm on my crusade.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful story and a beautiful mission. And I think it's super important and valuable, especially for people in our community that have always been like behind the 8 ball, always been just trying to scrape up enough, always, trying to catch up and keep up with themselves. And I love how your approach is a little bit different. It's a little bit more compassionate when it comes to finances. The term or your title, the financial healer, is something that I think gives a new perspective on how you deal with your finances. I know that when I talk about financial freedom, instead of thinking of just having an abundance of money and just being able to throw it around and do whatever you want, I consider it to be a mindset, a confidence, right? That no matter how much money I have, financial freedom is the ability to say, I'm going to allocate my funds here, 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 and feel confident about that, right? So maybe that can come from an abundance of money, but it doesn't necessarily need to. So when you say financial healer, it kind of resonates with me as something that's kind of similar. And my question to you is, how did you come to become known as the financial healer?
Well, there's a lot of talk about, mental health and physical health, but very little emphasis on financial health. And people confuse and conflate financial literacy for financial health. But the problem with that is you can be financially literate and still have poor and even fatal financial health. Because, people are suffering from anorexic income, obese debt, spending addiction, and other financial ills. And like you said, there are 6 obstacles to help you optimize your financial health. And the first one, like you talked about, is mindset and knowledge deficiency, because you got to have the right mindset, whether it's, about money or weight loss or anything. Your mindset has to meet your goals, where you're trying to go. You have to have that mindset now. in order to get to where you want to get to later. You can't, want a rich man's wealth and have a poor man's, mentality. So that's one thing. And then again, like you said, the control over your finances. You have to plan where your money goes instead of wondering where it went. And most people, they don't, especially the folks that make the most money, the folks that are struggling, they seem to, kind of try to plan and they kind of know where their money is going. But, my clients that have, that make the money, they're the ones that really, need to take control more than the others. And then proper protection. My story is an example of that. You have to protect your health, your life, and your financial legacy, so it's, people don't think of that, matter of fact, I want to say open enrollment is going on now until January 15th to get that good health insurance at a reasonable price. And, folks are, COVID is happening. There's no reason you shouldn't have some good health insurance. So I'm enrolling people, and there are folks that, when I first started enrolling people, some people said, well, I don't get sick, I don't go to the doctor. I said, just because you don't go to the doctor doesn't mean you don't get sick. It means you don't go to the doctor when you get sick. And just because you don't go to the doctor doesn't mean there's nothing wrong. Had I not, just like my colleague, he didn't have the right health insurance with his kidney cancer diagnosis. So he was going to pay out the yin yang for that treatment. Fortunately for me, I did have the proper protection, so I didn't have to pay all that money. So those are three of the obstacles I talk about. And I don't know if you want me to keep going or what.
I think what you're saying is super powerful. You knocking me over the head. I need to get out a pen and paper. And I hope everybody listening right now has a pen and paper, because this is super important. This is the bloodline of your business. This is the bloodline of your lifestyle. Living in a capitalist society, becoming financially literate is super important. And I love the spin that you're putting on it, talking about it in terms of health, because, it's easier to picture. It's easier to connect with, when you say you're obese with debt and your bank accounts are anorexic, and what you said was to plan where your money is going so that you don't have to wonder where it went.
Yes.
That you was talking to me. On that. So
we all have heard. I'm talking this from experience. This is what I learned when I got my doctorate degree. I learned this from the School of Hard Knocks. And I've learned, from taking this class over and over. Over the years. You think you're gonna do what you think you know what you're doing, but then the results, just like when I talk equated to financial health. People know, like with your physical health, you need to eat right, exercise. But when you go to the doctor and see those results and get on that scale, that shows whether you did what you're supposed to do. And it's the same with financial literacy. You may know what to do, but your financial health is revealing whether or not you did it. So, people seem to be a little more receptive when you talk about financial health. But like I said, they still confused and conflated with financial literacy, but it's okay. I'll straighten them out on that.
Yeah, this is the interview that they need to see. Hey, Dr. Wendy, is there any way that we can prevent financial illness?
There are ways. And like I said, the first thing is get that mindset right. Get some knowledge. You don't have to have a doctorate degree in finance, but you do have to know some basics. You have to understand the effect that income and expenses have on each other. You have to understand the effect that spending has on your financial situation. And my clients, before we get started, the first thing I give them is the financial, part of my Financial Cures system is the spending challenge. They have to track their spending for 30 days. They have to, no matter what they buy, it could be a stick of gum. If they pay a penny for it, they need to write it down and keep track of it. And then at the end, I encourage people to do it at the end of each day, but at least at the end of each week, total up how much money you spent on not your expenses, not your rent and mortgage and that kind of stuff, but if you went out and bought that coffee every morning, if you bought ate out for lunch, or if you went to the grocery store, you're supposed to pick up some milk and you bought donuts and all this other kind of stuff you weren't supposed to get. If you buy lottery tickets or things that you really don't have to have, I teach them how to distinguish a need from a want. And if you start, tracking and you see that you're spending money on wants when you got needs that you need to be satisfying, then, it really awakens people's senses of like, wow. I had one of my clients at the end of the 30 days, he said, Wendy, I did that daggone challenge. I spent $800 last month eating out. I said, well, okay, he's a businessman. I said, so you took out a bunch of clients? And he said, no, it was just me and my wife and sometimes the grandkids. And it wasn't that he couldn't afford to do that, but it was an aha moment for him to say, dag, $800, I could have paid off a credit card or added or paid down on my mortgage or added on my reserve account, a number of productive things that would get him, where he's trying to go, instead of having, like he said, the only thing I got for that is a few extra pounds, So it's that kind of, mindset transition that we're trying to help out with in the beginning, because when you start seeing you spending, $5 or $10 a day on drinking coffee, that's, if you do it 5 days a week, that's, $25 or $50 a week or $200 a month that could be paying a utility bill or something. So, and then it makes you more conscious of where you spend and how you spend your money. So that's one thing, the mindset, and once you get that in tune, you'll start taking control of your money. But the proper protection is important as well, because like I said, we're in a time of COVID. You don't know what kind of situation is going to happen. You don't know if you got to go to the emergency room, or even if it wasn't COVID, if you're stuck. I slid and sprained my foot, a few months ago. I had to wear a boot. I had to go to physical therapy. I had to do all kind of stuff. But if I didn't have the proper protection, that could have cost me a few $1,000s, and I would rather spend my money doing some other things. So that's, you can do that. Now there's, I don't know if I got more time, but
You got all the
there's
time in the
another
world.
obstacle that we're coming up on is tax codes and tax laws. People want to be penny wise and pound foolish. They'll go and get, and I'm not knocking these franchise tax preparation companies, but you need to get somebody that is going to help you with a tax strategy, somebody that's going to ask you probing questions to make sure they have all the documents they need to, paint the best picture that will reduce your tax liability if that's applicable, or increase your tax refund. A lot of folks go, take their W-2s and maybe take their mortgage statement, and then the person on the other end, they just, put it in the computer, and whatever comes out, that's what you get, or that's what you pay. They're not asking you any probing questions. You may have a kid in college where you're paying some of that tuition, and, you get education credits. There are all kind of things. You may have a small business that you're not even talking about that could help reduce your tax liability. Or, if you have to pay, what's the next step to keep you from having to pay the next year? You need somebody that's going to help you with a strategy moving forward. And people think the 401ks, IRAs, 403bs, that those are retirement plans. And, they're a little bit, a piece of it. But those are tax codes that dictate, how much money you can put in, when you can put it in, when you can take it out. If you take it out too soon, there's a penalty. It's like, buying seed that you're going to plant tax-free, but you're going to pay taxes on the harvest. But you can talk to any farmer or anybody, say, look, I'd rather pay taxes on the seed and get my harvest tax-free. Because, most of the people that think that they're going to retire with their 401k, they end up, having to go work at Walmart after a few years because they ran out of money. So, you have to have someone that's going to help you understand those codes. And that's another area with the proper protection. You want to build a financial legacy, but you need to understand how those tax codes and laws impact you.
Mm-hmm. Right. All right. Let's talk about, we talked about prevention. We talked about becoming aware of your financial health. Let's say, because I know that there's a lot of people listening right now that have already been operating, less than ideally with their finances, right? And they've already developed some pretty serious financial illnesses. Is there any way that you would recommend overcoming, illnesses? And I know that there's probably some overlaps with prevention and overcoming, but is there anything specific to overcoming a bad financial situation if you're already in it?
The first thing is to diagnose your financial health. I'm gonna have to hold up my book. I don't know if you can see that or
Uh-oh,
not, but
that
anyway,
must be
it's
green.
diagnose your financial health, because you have to know where you are. Just like when you go to the doctor, you have certain symptoms, but they got to diagnose it based on what's happening with you. And the same with your finances. If you're in debt, if it's because of overspending and maxing out your credit card on stuff you don't even know what you bought, you need to know that. If it's you got medical bills that are more than what you can afford to pay, you need to know that. You need to know your financial position. And that's where I talk about my first book, Diagnose Your Financial Health, because until you know where you are, you can't get out of it to get to where you're going. So that's the key thing. It's just because, and people tend to want to hide from the finances. Your stuff is raggedy. Yeah, so what? But let's look at it. Face up that it's raggedy and look and see why it's raggedy so that we can fix it and make it better. And, so you can get out of that rut and out of that financial hole and get ahead and build that financial legacy. So the first step is to seeing where you are financially. That's the first thing. You may be overwhelmed with debt, but break it down. See is it credit card debt? Is it, you're spending more than you make? Do you have excessive, medical bills? Are you living above your means? There are a number of reasons why, you're in that shape, but you have to face up to it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. What would you say are the fundamental pillars of the financial cure system?
Well, the fundamental pillars are, like I said, diagnosing your financial health, transforming your mindset, getting that, knowledge that you need, proper protection, understanding the impact of the tax codes and laws on you. Then another obstacle I didn't talk about was, the global economic impact. We don't think about how that impacts us, but now we see, we're dealing with inflation. We're dealing with supply chain backup. Those are global economic impact factors. And we need to consider those, because like I said, I went to the grocery store and I was telling my husband, I said, thank God we're financially healthy, because I went there and a bag of oranges was $10. I'm like, $10. I don't really eat oranges because I'm diabetic, but sometimes I get it from my kids and I'm like, I ain't buying no $10 oranges,
At the day.
And, yeah, and some stuff, I buy this pre-cooked bacon and I used to pay like $8 for a pack and it was $16. I'm like, good Lord, this is just like in the last few months. It's not like it was just, years ago, but things are expensive. People are feeling it in when they go grocery shopping, when they go to the gas tank, it's expensive. And you have to understand how that's impacting you. You got to position yourself, and then market loss and market risk, those 401ks and IRAs, they're impacted by the market. So you have to understand that just because you put a certain amount of money in doesn't mean that you're going to get what you think out. And then the last one that I talk about is taking action. Because like the Bible says, faith without works is dead. You can hope and wish and dream and have what you think is faith, but if you don't do anything to make it happen, it's not going to happen. And there's one saying that says, what you get is the difference between what you want and what you do. So, if you want everything, you don't do anything, then you're not going to get anything. So you have to, like I said, there are those 6 obstacles that you have to overcome to really, get it in order. You have to do all 6. You can't leave one. You can, but it impacts, the results. So
Yes, indeed. And I'm at this point, I'm ready to buy your book and hire you as my coach. I need you in my corner for sure.
Hey.
And I'm so glad because I'm feeling your energy and your commitment, your dedication to the topic. I understand how knowledgeable you are. You know what you're talking about. And I think that working with you is kind of that shortcut to a wealth and abundance of awareness, financial awareness. So I think that working and collaborating with you would be a great opportunity for myself and anybody listening right now. My question for you is, what is it like? What would you say it's like to work with you?
Well, I'm tactful, but I'm frank and direct. I'm not going to sugarcoat things. If I see that you need to handle things, I'm not going to beat you down, but I ain't going to hear all these excuses and all that. It's like, look, and then some people, they look at me and say, oh, you got it together, so, you don't have financial problems. It's like, look, the reason I can tell you about it, because I have been there. Like I tell people, I have been bankrupt, foreclosed, repoed. I've had those issues, but I've learned over the years how to figure it out. I didn't have a good, or I shouldn't say a good, I didn't have a financial strategist, when I was struggling, but I figured it out. My financial strategist was the Lord, because he's like, you either gonna learn this lesson or you're gonna take this class over again. I took a few classes over again, but I learned the lesson. And eventually, you try to be around people, because back then in my day, and I'm dating myself, we didn't have coaches. You had a mentor that, if you were lucky to have a mentor, that would kind of guide you and tell you some things. But we didn't have coaches. There were people that say, okay, you're going to be my coach, get me out of this. You had people that, had attorneys, you had accountants, but even then you didn't know if it was the right fit. You just say, okay, I'm gonna get this accountant, but were they the right accountant? That you need a tax accountant for tax issues. You don't need a regular forensic accountant for tax issues. So, you have to understand. And now there's a plethora, as they say, of coaches. So, but even then, you still have to have the right match, the right fit. So, there's opportunity out here. Not you got the internet. So we didn't have the internet back then. We had to go to the library and figure it out. There was no internet. We just go on the computer and Google something and you get 1,000 hits to say, here are the answers, whether they're the right answers or not. It was still available for you to kind of find out some things.
Right at your fingertips, huh?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
how can we get in contact with you? How can anybody connect with you in order to either buy your book or connect with you on a mentorship level?
Okay, well, I'm going to give a gift. If you text the word guide, GUIDE, to 770-796-4944. That's guide, GUIDE, to 770-796-4944. And you'll get my guide on 6 ways to stop hemorrhaging money. And it's basically a lot of the things I talked about today. And then when you text that number, then I'll get your information.
Nice, nice. And how can we tap into your show?
Well, you can go to FinCures, that's FINCURES.com. And that's the site for the show that's got the first season, which are 6 episodes, some really good information about credit, about training, about proper protection, about 501c3, nonprofits, about, giving and being involved in with nonprofits. And it's really a good season. I was really shocked myself, because I knew all the speakers, but it was like, dang, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. So I learned a few things myself, but it's a really good, or else you can go to Zandra TV Network, on Roku, Amazon Fire. Is it Amazon? Yeah, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and I think Hulu. But the most direct way is fincures.com.
Beautiful stuff. I'm ready to tap in. I'm excited. And I know people watching right now probably tapping out of this to tap into that right away. And this has been a phenomenal conversation. I want to thank you again. Before I let you go, I got one more question for you.
Okay.
Dr. Wendy, what is one thing that anybody listening right now can start doing? Any maybe a baby step that anybody can start doing right now to start living a life by design instead of by default?
Okay, well, my motto is when you think right, speak right, and do right, things will flow right for you to optimize your financial health. So think, speak, and do, and then you'll get the flow. So, that's kind of the pattern that you need to go on. And, I mean, they're welcome to buy my books. I've got two books. The first one is Diagnose Your Financial Health. The next one is Optimize Your Financial Health. And they're part of the Financial Cures book series. So I'll have, a few more coming out. I've got another one coming out at the end of this year. Well, probably by August, called Protect Your Financial Health. So, I'm giving guidelines on how to do it, how to get folks straight, because everybody needs to at least know, because if you know and do, then you'll get the results. But if you know and don't do, then like I said, that's like being financially literate and having poor financial health. So
Right. And I think that might be my biggest takeaway is, how people push financial literacy, but what about the habits? What about,
mhm.
being connected to actually creating the generational wealth that we talk about so much. So I know I'm a better person for having talked to you today. I hope everybody
Thank you.
listening took away something very powerful. I know you've said some tremendously powerful things. I'm going to have to rewatch it again for sure, take some notes. I want to thank you again for talking to me. This has been a magical experience.
Well, thank you for having me, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate your listeners, and I hope they do listen to it a few times and take those notes and get in touch with me, get my guide and get my books, and empower yourself, because that's what it's all about. You have to do it. Nobody can do it for you. Even if you get a good financial strategist, you still have to take action. They can tell you what to do, but you have to do it.
That's a fact. That's a fact. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Wendy Labat. And thank you, everybody else, for tapping into the Mindful Moneymakers podcast. And as always, love, be well, and don't forget to have the guts to follow your guts. Peace.